This world had devolved into a strange, living hell, a realm overrun by monsters impervious to conventional weaponry. Humanity's final bastion of hope rested in a select few who possessed superpowers. At the pinnacle of them all stood our protagonist. But even the mightiest hero is not invincible. Betrayed by a clandestine organization and ensnared with legions of grotesque monsters, his life was tragically cut short. Yet, fate granted him a second chance, regressing him to a time before the apocalypse. He was reborn, trapped within the frail body of an infant, yet retaining all his memories of the beasts and his signature power, the unique ability to absorb the strengths and essences of the monsters he vanquished. After a more careful survey of his surroundings, the startling realization dawned on him. He was now a helpless baby, as his mind raced to comprehend this bizarre turn of events. A slippered foot stepped silently into his room. His instinct screamed. He immediately went on high alert, scrambling back into the corner of his crib. As a strange figure loomed ominously over him, his thoughts swirled in a vortex of paranoia, desperately trying to identify this potential threat. Could they be an agent from that treacherous organization? But just then, the woman leaned in, her face etched with a loving expression, and softly greeted him as Achan. It appeared this mysterious woman was his new mother. She had simply come to check on her child, having noticed that he was no longer sleeping. The woman then returned to her cooking, assured that he was safe. Now called Achan, he took a moment to absorb his new reality. Everything around him was peaceful and immaculate, a stark contrast to the ruined world he once knew. A television hummed, and he could hear the bustle of life just outside the serene house. Critically, there were no signs of monstrous threats. This was undeniably an era of profound peace. To awaken here, reborn as a defenseless baby, could only mean one thing. He had been reincarnated. He was now in a parallel world where the great catastrophe had never occurred. And more importantly, the Sinister organization did not exist here. This meant that for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Achan was about to experience true, unadulterated freedom. Despite the hellish existence he had endured before, it seemed the gods of destiny had not forsaken him. This day would forever be etched in his memory. As the dawn of a new saga, he glanced toward the nearest calendar and his heart sank. The year read 2020. This meant he had awakened before the great catastrophe. This was far from good news. He was utterly useless in his current infant form. He couldn't even stand without clinging to something for support, his tiny limbs too weak to bear his own weight. His throat also felt undeveloped, a stark difference from his battle-hardened body. So forming words was impossible. All of this was a horrifying revelation for him, because time was a luxury he did not have. There was no time to idly play the part of a normal baby. When the world teetered on the brink of annihilation, Achan looked toward his new mother and coldly calculated if she could be a useful asset. Instead of seeking her protection, however, perhaps he could just use her like a puppet to advance his own objectives. She had to possess some utility, after all, even if she didn't seem particularly dependable. She was the only adult he had direct access to. He wondered if she was at least nimble, but a cascade of boxes tumbling from a high shelf quickly disproved that theory. She wasn't coordinated with her hands, either, as she piled an impossibly high amount of flour into a bowl while cooking, nor did she possess any culinary skill. And she nearly incinerated the entire house while attempting to prepare breakfast. It was painfully obvious she was hopelessly clumsy, but at the very least, she earnestly tried her best to care for her baby, even with her hair singed by the fire she had just caused. This already felt like the end of the world, and the future of his new existence looked incredibly grim. The doorbell suddenly chimed. His mother moved to answer the summons, expecting to receive a package that had just arrived. But before she could even open the door, she had to locate her missing wallet so she could pay the delivery fee. As she departed to search for her wallet, Achan's mind raced. He tried to recall the last time he'd heard that word, delivery. The last he remembered, delivery drivers were couriers of death, carrying packages to meet countless unsuspecting people, but they were carriers of something else. Those same delivery workers were also vectors of the infection, and it always culminated in a terrifying bloodbath. As the horrifying realization of the situation dawned on him, and the true meaning behind this package delivery became clear, the front door slowly creaked open. A ghoulish, rasping voice echoed from the other side, insistently urging him to accept the package. As the door swung wide, his worst fears were confirmed. The figure on the other side was indeed infected. It had grotesquely transformed into a delivery monster. There was no time for fear. Even in his infantile body, he had to find some makeshift weapon to defend himself. The only things within his reach were the baby bottle his mother had given him, and a soft pillow as well. He seized the pillow, tossing it strategically onto the ground, when suddenly the monster launched a deadly assault, aiming straight for his head. The devastating beam tore through the crib, and Achan clutched his bottle, executing a swift escape from the splintering crib and landing squarely on the pillow he'd thrown down just moments earlier. It went without saying that if a blast of that magnitude had touched him, he would have been instantly annihilated. Fortunately, his vast combat experience remained, a remnant of battling monsters in his past life. And from that brutal experience, he knew that there was no way he could defeat his current adversary head-on. It appeared to be an amplified monster. And to make matters worse, the tentacles writhing on its head looked exceptionally dangerous. But he recalled another critical fact. Powerful monsters like this one were notoriously clumsy at making tight turns. He expertly tossed his bottle just under the monster's path, and it tripped mid-lunge as it rushed toward him, soaring over his head and crashing spectacularly through the window. For the first time ever, Achan was actually grateful for all the brutal battles he was forced to endure in his previous life. As he savored his small but brilliant victory, a strange tail erupted from his back and shot out the shattered window after the fallen monster. It reached the lifeless corpse, sprawled on the street below, and began devouring the monsters. Core like a ravenous, living entity, Achan grabbed the tail, watching in astonishment as it munched on the pulsating monster core. He was intimately familiar with it. This was the very ability he possessed in his previous life, the Tail of Tautai. It was an exceptionally potent ability, but he had absolutely no idea why it persisted even after his reincarnation. The great catastrophe was destined to occur 4 years into the future, and Achan, in his past life, was born 3 years after that. He couldn't comprehend what was happening, but he knew he was incredibly fortunate to receive this power out of nowhere. In his past life, he acquired this ability after absorbing the core of a monster that also possessed the legendary coyote tail. Another stroke of incredible luck was that the younger someone activates their power, the more immense its potential will become. To test this theory, he transformed his hand into a razor-sharp blade and used it to strike his crib, bending the metal instantly. In his previous existence, he awakened as a formidable S-class hunter when he was 7. But since he now wielded this power as an infant, he was on the path to become the legendary Triple S rank. This time, this was his golden ticket to unimaginable riches, fame, and legions of beautiful women. In that case, he had no reason to remain shackled in this house, playing the masquerade of a clueless, innocent baby. As he crawled away to embark upon his new life, the crib he had bent earlier began to topple. Its trajectory aimed directly on top of him. Achan desperately tried to move out of the way, but his infant body failed him, and he was left completely immobilized. The damaged metal crib eventually gave way and started to fall heavily to the side. And the very last thing he saw as his vision faded was his mother, frantically rushing to shield him with her own body. As the crib descended, a dark memory surfaced, his past life and his ruthless master, the man who subjected him to countless, horrifying trials. That man had forced him to perform disgusting acts, like consuming dog food just to stay alive. Actions like that were designed to prove that he was truly nothing more than the organization's loyal dog. Achan gritted his teeth in fury, enraged at the memory, the humiliation of being branded as the organization's dog. He slowly regained consciousness as the warm morning sun began to shine upon his face. It seemed he had blacked out after vanquishing the monstrous foe. He slowly pushed himself into a sitting position and saw his mother nearby, diligently writing in a notebook. It appeared she had managed to save him after all. But now, the pressing question was why he had fainted in the first place. It became clear that the raw power of his ability was too much for his infant body to handle. He had only used it for a mere 30 seconds. And yet the exertion completely drained him, leaving him utterly defenseless. For now, his priority must be to get stronger, if he ever hoped to wield his incredible powers once more. As he pondered this dilemma, He heard the soft, muffled sounds of his mother crying. He peeked over at the book that she was reading and noticed it was covered in sticky notes plastered on the page. She wrote about how she had almost lost her precious treasure. It was painfully obvious she was talking about him. There was also a dark, nasty bruise forming on her back, and he knew it was highly likely she got the injury from protecting him. The mother from his past existence would have gleefully sold him off to the organization for a quick profit. And yet, this woman had risked her own life to protect him. He reached out with one of his tiny hands to comfort her, and as soon as his small fingers touched her, she reached over and pulled him into a tight, warm hug. It seemed this woman was fundamentally different from the last, and that realization made him decide to stay by her side for now. Regardless, there was still precious little time remaining. The world as he knew it would change in less than a week. The next monstrous threat was surely already on its way, and he needed to be capable of fighting for more than a fleeting 30 seconds if he wanted any hope of protecting his new home. Meanwhile, outside their apartment complex, a window cleaner convulsed in agony as a viscous blue slime began to seep from his eyes, mouth, and nose. The grotesque blue ooze slithered down his body and flowed into the drain pipes far below him, making its way toward a very specific destination. As Achan was contemplating his next strategic moves, his mother brought something over to him. Carefully covered by a large, red blanket, she dramatically pulled back the blanket to reveal a dog, sitting inside a cage, a gift for him. She explained that she got the dog from their neighbor, so that he could have a new companion. Achan instantly recognized the dog from his past life. It had been a fierce, formidable mutt, and he never imagined he would encounter it again in this new timeline. On top of that, the massive dog was far too large to be a simple baby's playmate. However, this unforeseen development might just turn out to be a great advantage for Achan. His mother might have been a bit scatterbrained, but it appeared she could be quite useful at times. After all, if he could train this dog correctly, it could potentially evolve into a powerful, loyal ally. It could even grow into a reliable means of transportation. Having a gigantic dog might not be so bad after all. His mother smiled warmly at the little grin on his face. It seemed she had made the correct decision. And, at the very least, it had brought him some joy. She left the two of them to get acquainted, while she went to attend to more chores around the house. Achan stared the dog down, his mind already formulating a plan for what to do with it. For now, the first step was to feed it. He presented the dog with a sausage from the kitchen, and gave it the command to eat. If the dog accepted the food, then Achan would officially become its master, and a rigorous training regimen could commence, despite the baby's bold attempt at forging a pact of dominance with the dog. It seemed the canine was too simple-minded to comprehend the gravity of their interaction. As the dog bent down to retrieve the offered sausage, Achan forcefully stomped on its head, a clear demonstration of the difference in their power dynamic. However, even though the dog didn't understand the baby's complex intentions, that didn't mean it would tolerate such blatant disrespect. It retaliated, striking Achan with two well-placed paws to the face, sending the surprised baby flying backward. Then, it turned away to enjoy its sausage in peace. But our protagonist was not going to accept this defeat lying down. Achan leapt up to counterattack the dog with a ferocious battle cry. He pounced on the unsuspecting canine, and the two of them engaged in a chaotic brawl, while the mother laughed heartily at their playful antics. From her perspective, it looked like the two of them had already become the best of friends. As she was cooking, she realized that she had run out of flour. When she bent down to search for more in the cupboard, though, a monstrous blue slime erupted from the kitchen sink, and it towered menacingly over the brawling dog and baby, its sights set directly on the oblivious woman, who was still rummaging for new flour to use. The menacing slime monster launched itself into the air, aiming a deadly strike directly at Achan's mother. The loyal dog sprang into immediate action and rushed valiantly toward the monster, desperate to intercept it before it could harm her. It reached her just in the nick of time, shoving her into the sink cupboard just before the slime could land its devastating attack. Thankfully, the mother remained completely unaware of what was going on, while the slime and the dog engaged in a life-or-death struggle behind her. Achan watched the entire spectacle unfold with an unimpressed expression plastered on his face. This particular monster was far too weak to cause any real problems, but it would still be a nuisance to deal with. Its liquid form rendered all slashing and stabbing attacks useless. They would have to find another, more creative way to handle it. His mother tried to extract herself from the cupboard, but she was more preoccupied with the throbbing pain in her head, not even noticing the intense, desperate battle raging between the dog and the monster just behind her. The slime eventually began to envelop the struggling dog, and it started to morph into something entirely different. Achan knew he would have to act fast before the situation spiraled out of his control. He remembered from his past battles that this particular slime monster was extremely weak to dryness. So, he needed to find something to use to dry it up. His eyes immediately fell upon his baby bottle, which was filled with powdered milk. He quickly opened it before launching it at the monster. The slime recoiled violently and shrank dramatically in size, before bouncing erratically around the room, rapidly losing moisture due to the powdered milk. This sent it into a desperate panic, and it was reacting wildly because of it. Achan seized the golden opportunity, and once it stopped moving, he trapped it securely under a dustbin. It seemed the immediate threat had passed, and both the dog and his mother cautiously peeked their heads up from behind the safety of the kitchen counter. His mother then managed to accidentally spill flour all over the both of them, leaving them even more disoriented than they already were. Because of her clumsy spill, his mother rushed off to go and wash herself off before the flour could permanently stain her outfit. Meanwhile, Achan continued to relish the thrilling victory of successfully capturing a live monster. Slimes could be utilized as a natural monster repellent, which meant that if he could somehow manage to spread the captured slime's liquid all over the windows, it could act as a powerful deterrent against any future monster attacks that might occur in the near future. Suddenly, the dustbin began to shift and the slime leapt out from underneath it, taking advantage of the momentary silence as a prime opportunity to escape. The dog intercepted it before it could get too far, and Achan rushed over to try and trap it once more, but it still managed to slip away from them, this time completely, avoiding being captured under the heavy dustbin. Before it made its escape, it defiantly raised a middle finger at the two of them as it slipped out the open window. The slime had invaded their home on its own and caused complete chaos, and then had the audacity to try and leave on its own terms. It may have been weak, but it was far too arrogant for both of their likings, and that simple fact made them too furious to allow it to escape so freely. Achan grabbed a nearby umbrella to use as a makeshift weapon and climbed aboard the dog, his newfound trusty steed. It was time for him to give chase to the fleeing monster before it got too far away and caused even more trouble. There was no way they could permit its escape, lest it return to cause more trouble for them or other innocents in the future. They reached the ground floor of the building and spotted the slime perched precariously on top of a nearby building. It dripped its viscous liquid onto the head of a girl passing by, and she looked up just in time to see it leaping down in an attempt to completely swallow her up. Achan and the dog rushed heroically to her rescue as the baby frantically tried to figure out what to do. If he used his own raw strength, he definitely would not be able to hold out for long against the slime. But if they allowed the monster to feed on the girl freely, then this peaceful street would soon become a sea of blood. That kind of horrifying scene was something that Achan had witnessed more than enough of in his past life. The dog was just fast enough to reach the girl in time and leap protectively over her, while Achan opened up the umbrella, blocking the deadly rain of slime before it could make contact with the girl. The slime was not deterred and jumped off the umbrella, this time aiming to attack the dog and baby directly, since Achan could only maintain his powers for a very short time. He had one single shot to use and finally end the monster. In a flash, he unleashed an enhanced punch infused with his powers, blowing straight through the monster's core and completely destroying it. The slime exploded, raining harmlessly down on the area, utterly and completely defeated, while Achan and the dog stood victorious after the short but intense battle. Thankfully, he was just in time to save the girl before she became slime food, but she had also witnessed him using his powers, and she looked absolutely terrified. Without wasting a single second, the girl took off, sprinting frantically down the road without even looking back. It was understandable that she ran away in terror, considering the impossible scene that she had just witnessed. The more difficult thing to consider now was how long it would take him to clean up this entire mess. His tail emerged from his diaper once more and began to absorb the vanquished slime, which was scattered all around the street. It appeared that the tail possessed the power to absorb another monster's abilities. In his past life, the only way for Achan to absorb a new ability was if he switched it out with his previous one. However, now, the tail was rapidly consuming all of the scattered slime, liquid, and converting the power into his own. He tested out his new power, forming a small slime ball in the palm of his hand, and it really did seem like the two distinct powers were coexisting within his body. In his past life, Achan had tried his very best to ensure that he switched his abilities as little as possible, so he wouldn't be discovered by the Sinister organization. That cautiousness ultimately ended up being his downfall, but that didn't change how incredibly strange it was that the tale of Tao Tai had somehow evolved. All on its own, it can most likely be attributed to his young age. The younger the age of a person, when they first start developing their abilities, the more powerful the ability becomes, and the faster that person is able to adapt to and master. Achan had become an eligible user for these abilities at the age of 10, but everyone younger than him had perished. Most children simply couldn't survive the lethal monster toxins, and they all ended up dying as soon as they were exposed to it. But now, Achan was even younger than any of the other potential candidates from his past life, meaning that his growth potential was truly incalculable. While he was lost in thought, figuring out what to do, the loyal dog brought him back home safely. He jumped off the back of his trusty steed and used his new slime powers to coat the entire area, ensuring that no more monsters would be coming to his home anytime soon. But just doing that alone had already drained him of all his energy and left him completely exhausted. There was no use in thinking about acquiring new abilities or adapting to his current ones, because his stamina was just far too low for him to be able to do anything with his newfound powers. However, he didn't need to worry too much about the potential future, since the monsters shouldn't come and disturb them anymore. Thanks to his new slime barrier, Achan collapsed to the floor in sheer exhaustion, and the dog came over to him with a menacing look in its eyes. It looked like it was finally time for the dog to get its revenge for that earlier humiliation. The dog leaned down and picked Achan up by the scruff of his shirt, and for a terrifying moment, the baby thought that he was about to be turned into dog food. Back in the apartment, his mother emerged from the shower, fully cleansed of the flour that had rained down on her earlier. She headed to the living room to see how her son was doing and saw him snuggled up cozily with the dog on the floor. It may have looked like they were snuggled up, but in reality, Achan was struggling fiercely against the immense weight of the dog on top of him. Hours passed, and the baby was finally able to free himself from his fluffy, four-legged prison and get back to work on fortifying the apartment. He managed to coat the windows, vents, and also the drainage pipes with the special slime. Now, even if a major disaster were to strike the house, they would be safe and sound for a while. While undertaking all of this, he was able to figure out the current state of his tail. The tail, apparently, could now stock up to 4 abilities at once, unlike in his past life, where he had to swap out one ability for another. Right now, he could use both the Tao Tai tail and his newly acquired slime powers, but only for about a half a minute. In order to truly prepare for a major disaster, he was going to need to do other things. One of the first things any survivor desperately needs in the apocalypse is a stockpile of supplies. The biggest cause of death after the disaster wasn't even the monsters themselves. It was the mass starvation caused by disrupted logistics, which eventually led to a desperate, violent scramble for any available supplies. If someone could manage to stockpile supplies early on and avoid the ensuing conflict altogether, that person could even attract followers and build a faction of people on their side during the most dangerous parts of the coming disaster. Achan would need to prepare for this as soon as possible. But as a baby, there was a strict limit to what he could accomplish. Supermarkets were always crowded, and eventually, these places would be teeming with monsters. If even a single person gets infected, the disease will spread like wildfire, with no hope of ever slowing it down. With his current frail body, Achan definitely wouldn't be able to handle a large horde alone. But there also weren't many other places that he could get supplies from right now. As he was pondering any other possible options, he might have to acquire supplies in the future. His mother's phone suddenly rang on the living room table. He went over to check who it was. and saw a stream of messages coming in from the landlord's group chat. Luckily for him, her phone wasn't locked, so he could easily open it up and see what was going on. The people in the group chat were discussing a strange new virus that was beginning to spread around, and how people infected with the virus were turning into grotesque monsters. It was clear that they didn't yet comprehend the true severity of the coming apocalypse, the one that was coming, and Achan was more than happy to enlighten them a little about it. He sneakily created a new account and hopped in the chat room, informing people that a great disaster was coming and that they needed to gather their supplies before everything descended into utter chaos. Although he was trying to help them by providing carefully guided instructions, it was painfully clear that no one believed him. The fact that he didn't even have a profile picture yet, since he had just freshly created the account, also didn't help his case at all. There was nothing he could do as a helpless baby, and online forums weren't much help either. At this rate, all of them would end up dead long before the organization could even form. A friend request suddenly popped up on the phone. He accepted the request out of sheer curiosity, and the person on the other end immediately cut to the chase and told him that they wanted to make a deal with him if he was truly searching for vital supplies. The person's username was Hot, and it sounded eerily familiar to the baby. That was the very same name of a woman who worked for the organization, who was also named Hot. His guess was spot on. The person on the other side of the screen was indeed the very Hot that he was thinking of. She relaxed against her high-tech chair in a room filled with computers and various gadgets, while casually texting him. It looked like things were about to get very interesting. For her, it was clear that whoever she was talking to was an extremely cautious person. However, before they would make any type of deal, they wanted to hear what her master plan was. Talking to them was already becoming very troublesome, and they had barely spoken any words to each other. So she decided to be direct and make him a proposal in hopes of finally sealing their deal. She offered to give him all the supplies he could want, whether that be food, water, armor, or whatever else they might need. The only thing that she would place a price on was any information that he might need. That goes for 100 million yen. But for Hot, transportation was also a significant problem. So she offered to give him the information that he needed if he would give her 20% of the supplies that he managed to collect. Both the tone of her voice and the 100 million yen starting price sounded like something more fitting for a grade schooler. Looking at it logically, there's no way that this person he's talking to isn't the Hot he remembered from the organization. He continued to parley with her, asking her directly why he should trust anything she says. On top of that, he also asked why he should even agree to her negotiations in the first place. Hot asked him if he was hoping to become her enemy instead of a valuable ally. She would prefer that they get along instead of bickering or constantly distrusting each other. The baby agreed and asked to know the location of the place to pick up the supplies. She told him that she had put the information in a mailbox at the bottom floor of the apartment building where he currently lives. The organization had not formed yet, which meant that Hot wasn't executive of it yet, and despite that, she was still a very dangerous woman who used information to toy with people for her own personal gain. Once she sets her sights on a target, she will use every single trick she knows to exploit that person to the fullest extent that she possibly can. There was no way she would want to get along with someone that she had just started talking to. She just wanted to lure him into a trap, using the information as the bait. This time, however, Achan was wise to her deceptive tricks, and he would be the one to stir things up, not her. He took a much-needed rest first and slept for 2 hours. By the time he woke up, his used-up stamina from earlier was completely recovered, and he was ready to go and get the information he needed. The elevator was equipped with security cameras, and he definitely did not want to reveal his identity to her so easily. So instead, he turned his attention to the nearby stairs. As he got there, he realized that there was one major problem with his plan. He was still a helpless baby, and the stairs were much too difficult for him to climb with his current tiny body. In that case, he had to rely on his fluffy new companion. He turned to the dog, sleeping soundly on the couch, knowing that the pooch was his only hope of reaching that critical mailbox. Achan went to wake the dog up by grabbing its tail and yanking it, but the dog was not the least bit amused. It slapped Achan away with its powerful tail, sending the little kid flying with a bright red cheek. And Achan had thought that he had managed to tame the great beast, but it looked like they were still not on good terms. Achan spotted something on the kitchen counter that should be able to help his cause. It was a box of treats, and he should be able to use that to lure the dog into helping him. He poured some of the dog treats in his hands and brought it up to its nose. In a matter of seconds, the dog got up and agreed to the deal immediately. It looked like, despite its strong facade, the Mo was actually rather easy to please. With his transportation now secured, the next step was getting to the place where Hot had dropped the information before his mother woke up. He rode the dog through the vast apartment building and eventually reached the area where the mailboxes were. Inside one of the many mailboxes, there was a bright pink letter sticking out of it. That was obviously what his target should be, but there was also a camera watching the area as well. It was obvious that Hot wanted to use the camera to confirm his identity. If that happened, then his information would be sold immediately, and he would lose his upper hand. Hot doesn't mess with people she doesn't know, so Achan had to keep his anonymity no matter what. In that case, he just had to throw her off his trail. The baby activated his powers, stretching slim, red tendrils around the room and scanning the surroundings for anything suspicious. Besides the main apartment security camera, he managed to find 3 other hidden cameras, most likely installed by her. It was obvious that she desperately wanted to expose his true identity. Hot laughed maniacally in her computer room, eagerly waiting to see what kind of sucker would fall for her trap. This time, however, without anyone getting close to the mailbox, she received a confirmation from the person that she's been speaking to that he had already collected the information. She desperately looked through the camera footage, but the only thing she saw on the live feed was a dog, idly standing beside the mailbox. Little did she know that just behind the dog was the target of her growing annoyance. Sneakily trying to read the letter without her knowing, he managed to figure out where the camera's blind spot was and used his furry companion to hide and read the letter subtly. He grabbed the flyer from the mailbox and rushed away without ever being seen. The flyer pointed him to a clearance sale deal in a local supermarket within the immediate area, and that was most likely where he needed to go. As he read through the flyer, Hot anxiously blew up his phone, demanding that he reveal who exactly he is. He taunted her back by telling her that he would reveal his identity if she gave him 100 million yen. That enraged Hot even more at the fact that whoever this person was, they were clearly underestimating her greatly, and she wanted to make sure that they would regret it. She activated a spider surveillance system hiding within a nearby drain and ordered it to scan the entire building. The spider-looking device was equipped with a high-tech camera, as well as being dust-proof, waterproof, and resistant to extreme temperatures, magnets, high-speed impacts, and electric shock. The spider made its way towards Achan and the dog, but it was immediately stomped flat by a pair of fluffy slippers coming down the stairs right behind them. Hot cried out in agony as her $30 million robot was destroyed in a matter of seconds. Mother, who had descended the stairs to search for them. She had grown worried after their prolonged absence. Across the network, Hot lamented the loss of her precious spider device. But fortunately, it seemed the audio transmission function miraculously survived. She could now hear a feminine voice on the other end, and then a startling realization struck her. The call function was also operational. This meant her targets should also be able to hear her speak. She seized a microphone, attempting to intimidate whoever was on the receiving end of the line, warning them that their battle was far from over, just because they had managed to crush her little spider. Now that she had a sample of their voice, she could expose all of their private messages and every dark secret from their past, all across the vast expanse of the internet. She continued her barrage of taunts, but the person on the other end gave no response. Instead, they kept talking to someone else entirely, commenting on how they were wearing such light clothing and that they might catch a severe cold. That's when it dawned on Hot. The person on the other end of the line could not hear her at all. She had been monologuing to herself this entire time. To add to her frustration, after conducting extensive research, even with her vast information network and connections, she couldn't seem to unearth the identity of the person on the other side of the screen. Whoever this enigma was, they were a complete ghost, and she had absolutely no clue. Meanwhile, Achan received a complimentary ride back to the apartment from his mother. She gently chided him for venturing out all on his own, reminding him of just how dangerous it was. Below, the high-tech mechanical spider lay, crushed and broken on the floor, now operating at a mere 4% of its capability. Defeated, Hot eventually reached out to Achan once more. She informed the baby that she would provide the critical information for free, as well as the promised supplies. It seemed she had already conceded defeat, and it was almost disappointing how easily she had given up the chase, despite all the immense trouble she had caused. When they finally returned to the apartment, Achan was surprisingly absolved of any blame for running out of the apartment on his own. His mother wrongly assumed that the dog had somehow opened the door by itself, and that the baby had merely crawled out after it while he was still half asleep. Because of this misunderstanding, he wouldn't be able to use the dog for a while, as it had now been securely tied up to prevent any further incidents like this one. According to the information from Hot, a large warehouse-style supermarket would be opening soon. This meant that she intended to give them supplies from a secret inventory that she had likely stolen from other people. For Hot to do this so willingly, she was being remarkably generous despite everything. If he was going to gather vital materials, then he needed to act sooner rather than later. But first, he had to devise a way to get to the supermarket. In the first place, he had strategically left the flyer out on the table for his mother to see, but she hadn't even noticed it yet. There was no possible way that he could just directly inform her about the impending end of the world. But he was going to have to do something. As he was trying to figure out his next move, he overheard her mentioning that there were only 5 days worth of powdered milk remaining. That was the perfect opportunity, and he could use that to his distinct advantage. He deliberately pushed over the cup of milk on the table and then pretended to still be soundly asleep. When she came over to investigate the noise, as she went to clean up the spilled milk, she finally noticed the promotional flyer on the table for the new supermarket. She picked it up and started to seriously consider checking it out. Everything was proceeding exactly according to Achan's master plan. The day finally arrived for their trip to the warehouse, and she dressed the baby in a ridiculous pink outfit, much to his utter disappointment. While the two of them were out, the dog had been left behind at home, with more than enough food to eat. They soon reached the supermarket, but before she could enter, a security guard rushed over to question what she was doing in the area. He informed her that there was a dangerous infectious disease currently going around, and people were supposed to refrain from going out. The mother tried to explain to him that she just wanted to buy some powdered milk for her hungry baby, but the guard was having none of her excuses. He was a government worker, and Achan knew that the government would soon completely disappear, so they wouldn't have to worry about things like this for very long. The guard was only doing this because he had been ordered to, and he firmly told her that she should return home immediately. As he was lecturing her, he failed to notice the grotesque monster stalking up silently behind him until it placed its massive hand on the man's head. In an instant, the monster squeezed its powerful hand, and the man's head popped like a bloody balloon. Then it turned its sights upon the defenseless mother and her young child. This monster was significantly larger than anything Achan had faced up to this point, and it was a strong, proliferative type, so it didn't have any discernible weak points either. He didn't want to reveal his true strength, but if he didn't unleash his power, then both he and his mother would surely die here. There was absolutely no time to waste. He was about to spring into glorious action, but his mother plucked him out of the stroller and tried to make a desperate run for it. Achan knew that running away was completely useless, since this thing was a whole different species of predator. It was far faster than any normal human, and his mother had absolutely no hope of escaping on foot. As the horrifying monster closed in on them, Achan noticed a case of fire extinguishers on the nearby wall. He then used his powers to shatter the glass case, and it exploded, covering the entire area in a thick gas. The sudden, dense cloud was enough cover for Achan to squeeze out of his mother's grasp and attack the monster, sending it flying away and crashing heavily into a wall. He had approximately 30 seconds until the thick dust settled to take care of this monstrous threat. Within that 30-second window, he was going to need to settle this fight with this grotesque monster before his mother noticed what was truly going on. His mother had passed out from the shock of the sudden attack from the monster, so he had to make sure to take care of everything before she finally woke up. Luckily for him, she was unconscious from the earlier impact, but there was no time. The proliferative type has its vital core located in its head. If he could just manage to strike its head, then it would definitely die in a single decisive hit. However, the monster was still, completely unharmed, even after the powerful strike he gave it earlier. Achan had to make sure to finish off the beast in one final blow before it could get back up and harm him or his mother. There were no shortcuts he could use like all the other times. This time, he was going to have to fight it head-on with his own raw strength. Thankfully, he could at least stand this time and didn't have to crawl around on the ground. The monster took the initiative and jumped directly towards the child, but Achan was able to nimbly dodge out of the way before it could take him down. He then used his ability to slice up the monster with thin, razor-sharp strands of his Tao-Tai ability. He didn't manage to take out the monster completely, but he at least managed to make it bleed. After that heavy, damaging attack, things didn't look so good right now. But Achan was sure that the one who was going to win this fight was him. He rushed off to attack the monster yet again, this time sure that he could at least hold his own against it. Thanks to his small, agile body, he was able to easily evade most of its attacks, and he used a string from his Tao-Tai ability to swing around its body and wrap around. Then, once he landed safely, he pulled the taut string once again, cutting through its flesh instantly. It seemed like he now had the upper hand, but he still needed to strike the monster in the head to finally defeat it. Luckily for him, with a body as large as that, it made it extremely difficult to aim for a fast-moving baby. It also couldn't use its full, immense strength because of how fast it was being forced to move. For the monster, it would be the same as trying to chase a nimble mouse. Eventually, Achan was about to outrun and outsmart the monster perfectly, wearing it down severely until it could barely move. This was all thanks to the vast experience he had built from countless battles in his old life. Up till now, thanks to the consistent, damaging attacks from the baby, the monster's power had been greatly reduced, and one more solid hit should be enough to take it down. He couldn't get too arrogant, though, and although the monster had been severely weakened by the constant, relentless attacks, it used all of its remaining strength to grab one of the spikes from its back and chuck it directly at the baby with incredible, devastating strength. Achan was fast enough to dodge the main attack, but it still managed to cut deeply into his forehead. He hopped away, putting significant distance between him and the raging monster before it could launch another one of those deadly attacks. If it continued to attack like that, then the baby would have no chance of getting closer. To finally finish it off, for now, he had to try and think up another strategy, like a surprise attack, or he had to find a way to divert its attention. There was no time left for him either, and he would soon feel the after effects of using the full strength of his incredible powers. For now, he might just have to run and take his mother far away before she gets seriously hurt. As he was still desperately trying to figure out what to do, he noticed his mother helplessly looking around back at the ground floor. It looked like his time had run out faster than he had originally anticipated, and now she had woken up and she was desperately searching for him. As she searched frantically around for him, she came face to face with the towering monster and stared up at it in utter shock. Instead of running in terror, though, she reached into her pocket to get something, and Achan desperately yelled for her to run away because she would definitely not be able to take on the monster by herself, but as the protagonist's mother. She definitely had some tricks of her own. From her pocket, she pulled out a stun gun and shot it at the monster, zapping it with intense electricity and causing it to freeze up completely. It may have been unorthodox, but this was exactly the diversion that the baby had been looking for. Achan leaped off the building toward the streets below, right as the monster recovered and swiped at his mother, sending her flying backwards as she fell to the hard floor, conveniently looking away from the fearsome monster. Achan came descending from the heavens with a massive attack, intent on taking out the trash once and for all. The monster looked up just in time to see a baby with a massive buildup of energy on its leg, coming down at it at incredibly high speed. The attack connected right on the monster's head, breaking it apart immediately and killing it instantly. His mother was still on the floor, unconscious, as the baby walked up to her to check on her condition. As much as he wasn't too fond of her just yet, it would have been way more dangerous for him if she hadn't been there, trying to protect him. Not only did she come to try and save him, despite the obvious danger, she also risked her own life to save him. There's still a lot of training she has to go through before she can be truly useful to him, but it seemed like he could at least trust her. As he thought that to himself, The after effects of his immense power came crashing in, and he collapsed right beside her, losing his consciousness as well. When he awoke once again, much later, he had a bandage on his head, and a strange, red-eyed man was fixing a new diaper for him. Achan didn't recognize this stranger, and his immediate form of self-defense was to pee all over the man, to try and scare him away. His mother quickly rushed in to apologize profusely, hoping that the strange man wouldn't get too offended. He wiped the pee from his face, accepting the fact that he had most likely just scared the little kid, and that's why it had happened. He then asked her if she was getting along with the dog. It looked like his mother was familiar with this man. The man was most likely the former owner of the dog, and he thanked her for taking good care of the mutt. Achan was more concerned about the fact that his mother had definitely seen the monster that attacked them earlier, but she was acting as if nothing had ever happened. Then he noticed that his hair was still wet. That probably meant that she was crying in secret, again while he was asleep. The man told her that they were heading out to stock up on more supplies, and invited her to come along with them. That immediately caught Achan's attention, as he realized that stocking up on supplies and buying them all out with the help of other people definitely wasn't a bad decision at all. Before he followed along with them, though, he still had to retrieve the valuable crystal core from a monster that he had just defeated. He jumped out of his stroller and hurried over to the monster's remains. Once he used his Tao-Tai tail to absorb it, he immediately gained the monster's unique power. This time, it appeared to be a hardening skill, and it had already fused into his bloodstream. It wasn't a bad skill to have, and now he could use his tail as some sort of shield. But before he crawled back to his stroller, he noticed the strange man from before having a call on his phone. He was talking with someone, and they seemed to be talking about the fact that he and his mother were both a burden to them. He also revealed that the reason he was bringing both of them along was because in an emergency, they could be used as decoys and at least be a little bit useful. The guy was definitely unhinged, and it was clear that he had sinister intentions. He told the person on the other side of the line to take another vehicle and grab more supplies. As Achan listened in on the dark conversation, he accidentally bumped the truck he was hiding behind. The man quickly spun around, ready to attack anyone that was eavesdropping on him. The man came up to him, but he was clearly expecting to see someone threatening, and instead saw just a little baby, which made him instantly let his guard down. The man patted Achan on the head and asked him how he got all the way there. Then he got back on the phone and told the person on the other end that the baby had heard their conversation, but he didn't care about it since he was just a baby. On top of that, since Achan was just a baby, killing him wouldn't be a problem. The baby bent his head anxiously after realizing that this guy was completely and utterly insane. They all packed into a car, and his mother secured him into a child's safety seat at the back. Then they prepared to set out with the man and 3 other people in the car. Achan didn't trust this crazy man to be the driver, but there was nothing he could do about it. If he could at least use his power, then he would be able to crush the crazy man in an instant and prove who was truly stronger. The others in the car got acquainted, and his mother tried to start a friendly conversation by offering some snacks to the others. It was incredibly strange that these people seemed so calm, despite everything that was currently going on. Achan started to wonder if they had even seen any footage of the monsters, and why anyone would even venture outside at the moment. The man started the car and waved to the person at the compound that they were staying at. As they left, Achan realized that their lack of awareness was probably a kind of self-defense mechanism. After all, even if people saw monsters or corpses, it didn't always mean that the world was ending. All they could do was act completely normal and try to hide their fear. As they continued to drive through the desolate town, Miss Ling brought out a box of sandwiches to share with everyone else in the car. The people in the car were all residents from the same apartment building that Achan and his mother were currently staying at. There was his mother, Ling Yingyu, a resident of room 502. Then there was Denku, a resident of room 103. And finally, there was Ryuka-san, a resident of room 104. His mother continued to offer snacks to the others. In the car as they drove toward the supermarket, Ryuka-san asked his mother how she was, managing to raise a child all on her own, despite how tough it must be. After all, she was young and beautiful, and it didn't seem like she was working either. It was also extremely dangerous to go outside with the child. His mother had originally considered leaving him at home, but she had noticed that whenever Achan was left alone, he would start to act completely crazy. She had to bring him with her. After giving it a lot of deep thought, Achan subconsciously tried to tell his mother to stop talking, as she sighed while thinking of all the chaos that had happened because of her child over the past few days. One of the men at the front was Chin Minoru of room 504. The driver commented that Ling was useful in a fight, especially since she managed to take down a large monster with her taser gun. They had also brought the dog as well in the truck that was following them, so they had some extra attack power if anything were to happen. Achan's mother didn't remember what had happened, and she didn't realize that it was her child who had done all the work. As they continued to drive through the empty town, the driver realized that something was very wrong. There should have been more monsters around, but the place was surprisingly empty. Suddenly, he noticed someone running on the road, clearly looking for help. As she was running through the road, looking for somewhere to hide, the wall of a nearby building burst wide open, and a massive hand reached out for her. Then, she was suddenly overrun by several monsters. All at once, the driver told them to hold on tight as he tried to maneuver the car to avoid a deadly collision with the monsters and the girl. The car and the truck both drifted to avoid the small crowd of monsters, and they managed to move by safely. The dog barked loudly in the back seat as the monsters crowded over the girl and pulled her to the ground. She cried for help as the monsters piled on top of her and attacked her. Today had been truly hectic. From the moment Achan and his mother left their house, they were surrounded by monsters, and Achan took a moment to analyze the grave situation they were in. The bug-headed monsters surrounding the car all had sting marks on their necks. The handler of all these monsters must be some type of cyborg. These parasite handlers were parasitic-type monsters, and they possessed the ability to turn humans into cyborgs. Their power wasn't much individually, but in large, overwhelming numbers. It was a completely different story, and as long as the handler ran around, the cyborg monsters would just keep on multiplying. The best thing they could do was find a way to escape. Immediately, the rest of the bug monsters that weren't piling on the poor girl from earlier started coming towards the car to attack those inside. They were way too close for the driver's liking, and in a matter of seconds, one of the monsters managed to break through the windshield. Achan looked around and knew that it was definitely possible for them all to survive this dire situation, but he needed to drive them off quickly before they became overwhelmingly large in number. Unfortunately, though, he could only use his powers for a mere 30 seconds, and if he wasted all of it here, then it was all over. He looked around the car and wondered if any of the passengers were able to fight. Ryu desperately looked out of the car at the girl, who was getting beaten and devoured by the monsters. She cried for the others in the car to stop wasting time and go save her. That immediately pissed off Achan, as he realized that she was going to be a huge burden to them going forward. Instead of trying to figure out a way to help everyone, she was crying for everyone to save her. They might as well leave her because it wasn't like she was useful in a fight. Shin Minoru told them that they shouldn't go and try to save the girl. She already had the same wound as all the other monsters on her neck, meaning that she was most likely already a lost cause. Shin Minoru clearly possessed sharp, observant eyes, but he was probably too old to be of any use in a battle. But he might at least be strong enough to carry some supplies. The driver asked if they should charge into the mess, but if they were going to charge in, then they should deal with the monsters first, before they all got wiped out. Achan did not like that idea, because it seemed like he was trying to get them all killed. They couldn't rely on this guy when it really counted. The person driving the truck behind them was most likely the same. Denku picked up a hard object from somewhere in the car and announced that he would go and help in any way he can. He looked like a total wimp, but he might also be the kind of character that surprisingly goes completely berserk out of nowhere. He was trying to say that he wasn't scared, but it was clear that he was not reliable at all. It looked like there really wasn't anyone in the car that could take down the monsters currently surrounding them. His mother reached into her bag to get the stun gun that she was using earlier. Once Dan heard that she was going outside with her gun, he decided that he didn't need to go out anymore. As they were all talking, a sharp object suddenly stabbed into the car, going straight through Den's chest. Then, he was suddenly tossed out of the car like a rag doll. Then, sharp claws dug into the side of the car, and a different insect monster peeked its terrifying head into the car and immediately stabbed a claw into Ryu, killing her immediately. It looked like this was the main body of all the cyborgs. It must have been hiding somewhere nearby, waiting for the right time to pounce. Since there was no one in the car that was reliable, it looked like the baby was going to have to step up and deal with this entire situation. Before he could get up, though, a sharp stinger headed straight towards his mother. He wasn't fast enough to stop it before it got close to her, but instead of the stinger stabbing her, it unexpectedly stabbed the car cushion instead. They looked to the front of the car to see Shin Minoru unexpectedly holding the monster back. Shin Minoru realized that this person must be the boss of all the monsters. The monster turned around and tried to stab him in the face, but he grabbed the stinger and broke it instead. It was clear that this man was something else entirely, since he managed to take down the boss of all the monsters with his bare hands. The monster screamed as he stabbed its own stinger into its neck. Then, as the monster's screams eventually faded, it died off, and Shin Minoru dropped its dead body off, making it fall down to the street floor. As he wiped the blood off his face, he complained about how old he was becoming. Meanwhile, Achan looked on in pure adoration as he realized that the old man was a total powerhouse. But then he realized that the fight wasn't over yet. The monster on the ground had a second phase, and they couldn't let their guard down just yet. Achan didn't know who this old man was, but just aiming for the heart wasn't enough to kill this particular monster. Just as he had expected, the monster started to rise up again, and it was clear that it was about to attack again. He didn't have a voice to talk, so he only had one way to warn the old man. Before things got really bad, he cried out as loud as he possibly could, causing the old man to look behind him and narrowly dodge a sneak attack from the insect monster. The old man had seen this before. When he was still in the Special Combat Division, he immediately realized that the monster wouldn't die by just stabbing its heart. That explained why the old man seemed to be so strong. He had worked in the elite Special Combat Division, and that's why he had training to deal with monsters like these. The man jumped out of the car to attack the monster and bring it down for good. It looked like it wouldn't die easily from simple methods, so Shin Minoru decided that this time he would use all of his energy to crush the monster. Once and for all, he grabbed the monster by its head and slammed his knee into its face, causing the skull to crack immediately. Just from the little fighting that he was doing, it was obvious that he had refined battle knowledge, and for him to make the decision to go for the head came to him very quickly. He should have realized sooner that the old man was from the military, and that he possessed special skills beyond the others in the car. In his past life, when he was the organization's dog, even though the military was already wiped out by the time he started going on missions, he heard rumors that after the government collapsed, the military became the largest force resisting the monsters. They were the mortal enemies of the organization back then, but among them, there was the Special Combat Division, which worked as the core unit. It seemed that they underwent a special training, and they were a thorn in the side of the Sinister organization. Thanks to the old man's efforts, they could finally go to the supermarket and get the supplies they needed. His mother initially suggested that they should head home too, but Shin Minoru immediately shut that idea down and told her that if they went home, something else might happen, so they needed to keep moving forward. It looked like they finally had a reliable person on their team, but now Achan had to figure out how to get this guy on their side. Maybe he could send out a fake military command, or he could blackmail Hot to make her send some insider information, or he could simply just cling to the man and force him to protect them. Just thinking about using the man for his own personal gain made the baby smile an evil, wicked smile. As he was thinking about what to do, the old man patted his head. Then he told Miss Ling to stay close to him with Achan so that he could protect them a little. She agreed immediately and promised not to be a burden to him and would follow him carefully. He told her not to expect too much from him and that he just wanted to help them. She thanked the man for his help earlier in taking down that fearsome boss monster, but he told her not to mention it. After all, if Achan hadn't cried out earlier, then he would have definitely died from the monster's surprise attack. Then he told the little baby that the more foolish someone is, the more they desire personal profit. That almost sounded like he could read the child's own mind and knew the selfish thoughts that he had just earlier. Achan crossed his arms defiantly and decided to peacefully accept the help from a man. But he knew that Shin Minoru's heroic personality would end up being his eventual downfall. They finally reached the massive supermarket that they had been aiming for since the very beginning, but the front gate was closed. It looked like it was their day off. The ads had said that the supermarket would be open, but the place was clearly closed for business. Achan knew that Hot was a master hacker, and she had probably shut down the supermarket remotely. Suddenly, the door opened up, and the driver explained to them that he had a friend remotely opened the door from somewhere else. As he said that, he smiled and flashed his phone, reminding them that they should remember to thank his mysterious friend later. That made Achan extremely suspicious, and he sneakily pulled his mother's phone out of her bag to check it. He opened the messages and saw that Hot had sent him a message recently, informing him that she had seen their car on the security camera and opened the gate for them. That confirmed that the driver definitely knew Hot. That made things a lot more complicated for him, because Hot and the driver were both very suspicious people to him. They eventually entered the vast supermarket, and Achan was just tired, now that they had finally reached their destination. The supermarket was huge, and there were a lot of supplies. In the warehouse, there were also no cameras in the area, so it looked like the baby didn't have to worry about being spotted. When using his powers, then he noticed that the old man had brought a weapon rack with him. That was to be expected of a former Special Combat Division soldier. But now that they were in the supermarket, the man that had been guiding them this entire time had suddenly disappeared. There also didn't seem to be any staff in the supermarket, so there was no way for them to buy or check out. As they were trying to figure out what they were supposed to do in the empty warehouse, they heard a slow clapping coming from elsewhere in the building. They looked forward and saw the man from earlier, smiling cheekily and tapping the boxes around it. Then he declared that everything in the store had already been purchased by his organization. The moment Achan dreaded the most had finally come true. The person standing in front of him was none other than a member of the organization. Even Achan's dog didn't like him, as it started barking furiously. The driver finally showed his true Sinister colors, confessing that he had only used all of them to gain access to the supermarket. Now that he was done with them, it was time to dispose of them like worthless trash. During his boastful, arrogant monologue, Achan immediately spotted a tattoo on the man's arm, which was a clear sign that he truly belonged to the organization. With a darkness in his eyes, the man declared that the supermarket now belonged to the East Lotus Society. His voice was filled with sheer menace, his threat especially aimed at the old military man. As he pulled a weapon from his pocket, he warned them not to move. The name of the society instantly caught Achan's full attention. He realized that this branch of the organization was anything but ordinary. They were a group of forerunners, responsible for enforcing the infamous hunting project. This very group had already been spreading their crimes even before the calamity began. That must be their reason for gathering supplies, because they could sense the coming disaster. Now, Achan understood why he had such a bad feeling about this man, something he had sensed from his smug, arrogant tone. But whoever this person was, baby Achan was ready to take him down. Meanwhile, Ling and the old man quickly grasped the immense gravity of the situation and noticed the lackeys now surrounding them. But the old man was prepared, as he immediately scooped up a shovel and hurled it at the generator. It struck with incredible force, embedding into the machinery that could burst at any given moment, and the sound of a potential explosion started echoing ominously through the area. The driver, however, remained standing there calmly. In the blink of an eye, a sinister grin spread across the man's face as he brandished a remote, seizing control of a nearby car. The old commander instantly knew the situation was spiraling completely out of his grasp. He lunged to tackle the driver, but at the last second, he was thrown back by a magically controlled stack of cartons. The next moment, the seasoned old warrior found himself staring down the cold, unforgiving barrel of the gun. With a mocking chuckle, the sinister organization member remarked that he wouldn't allow a military veteran to slip through his fingers so easily. He then warned him not to make a single move. But in a shocking twist, Ling bravely stepped forward, her own stun gun in hand, and warned the villain to back away from the old commander, or she would be forced to shoot. She demanded to know his true, sinister motives. The man, clearly amused by the situation, realized just how spectacularly and blissfully unaware she was for not having grasped the gravity of the situation until now. He even mockingly asked if she'd still think he was innocent after he put a bullet through her. Ling, still living in her own idealistic bubble, offered to simply share the supplies, as if she were hosting a friendly picnic. He actually laughed out loud at her incredible naivety, which was almost impressive in its own right. She was acting as if she were the one in charge here. He then reminded her of the time he left the dog with her, not out of kindness, of course, but because when he went to collect the money, the original owner was already dead. So naturally, he figured he might as well dispose of the dog as well. That's when she conveniently showed up, and he thought it would be amusing to see how she would juggle a massive, full-grown dog and a helpless baby. Shockingly, things had worked out in her favor back then. But now, with his gun at the ready, he rejected the foolish idea of sharing the supplies. There simply wasn't enough to go around. In the next moment, all of his lackeys aimed their guns directly at them. The boss declared that pitiful weaklings like Ling should just die. This very moment ignited a dark memory within Achan, a vision of his past under the thumb of the organization, where he was left with no choice but to eat vermin, just to survive the gnawing hunger. Back then, he had been looked down upon in this very same way. He snapped out of his dark reverie when his loyal dog prepared to attack the hired goons. Achan immediately launched a ball of slime at the generator, which instantly caused a complete blackout. The next moment, absolute darkness swallowed everything whole. The boss screamed for everyone to cease firing until they could find a source of light. At the same time, the boss raised his own gun. Seizing this golden opportunity, Achan activated his formidable power and was about to deliver a devastating punch when the old commander suddenly intervened, kicking the boss with immense force instead. Both Achan and the old commander looked at each other in sheer astonishment. Achan understood that it was his bad luck to be seen by the old man, who was a part of the official military. Eventually, they might consider him a dangerous monster, and there was a very real chance he'd be turned into a living research subject because of his incredible powers. As expected, the old man was thinking along the exact same lines as he was, wondering whether Achan was, in fact, a monster, just as he prepared to attack the baby. Achan immediately leaped and settled on a high upper rack, right in the old man's critical blind spot. The old commander switched on his tactical flashlight. Achan had also planned to turn on the lights, but he was extremely wary of the old man. He scoffed, realizing he now had no other choice but to take the old man down first. However, his plan was interrupted by a sudden, strange noise that alerted everyone. The people looked up and spotted a single slime, which distracted the entire group. With a smug, knowing smile, Achan took his usual seat in a nearby trolley and prepared to enjoy the coming show. To his utter astonishment, the slime transformed into a perfect doppelganger of the old commander. It attacked him, and soon everyone found themselves fighting against their own identical clones. The old man, too, braced himself for battle against his perfect double, cursing under his breath at this disastrous new development. Ling was absolutely terrified to see her perfect clone standing directly in front of her and pleaded with it not to come any closer. Her voice drew the old commander's attention. He glanced back and saw Achan crying nearby, while his clone tried to climb into the trolley with him. The old man assumed he must have seen this clone before. This meant our little dude's plan was working out perfectly, as he was now shedding theatrical crocodile tears, just waiting for the old man to swoop in like a knight in shining armor. As expected, the old commander immediately attacked the clone, which tried to reach for Achan. However, he grew increasingly frustrated when the clone reformed itself effortlessly, thanks to its fluid, slime-like nature. Realizing that brute force alone would not work, he hurled his heavy shovel aside, deciding it was time to adopt a brand new strategy, one better suited for dealing with monsters like this one. He opened his armory box and pulled out his firearm. Meanwhile, Ling managed to defeat her clone using an electric gun, because electricity was a known weakness of these slime creatures. Achan also vanquished his clone through a relentless barrage of damaging attacks, another known weakness. In the end, the old commander destroyed his clone using raw firepower, but the battle was far from over. Yet another slime clone launched itself directly at Ling, only for the old commander to shoot it at the very last second. However, the grotesque monster was still alive, desperately trying to wheeze and breathe, but the old commander kept on firing. determined to finally finish it off. He may not have killed it completely, but he had managed to injure it very heavily. But at the same time, the monster also stood up, ready to attack once more. Just as the old commander remained occupied, fighting off the persistent slime, Achan cursed silently under his breath, frustrated by the escalating situation. He couldn't use his powers openly. Doing so could expose his dangerous secret. He was taken by surprise when the boss suddenly grabbed him and took him hostage, warning Ling and the old man to drop their weapons. What the boss didn't realize, however, was that he had just made things much more convenient for our clever little protagonist. Achan silently activated his slime power and took control of one of the boss's own lackeys. That lackey then unsealed a live grenade, and in the next moment, a massive, deafening explosion rocked the entire area. Though the boss somehow survived the blast, he still had Achan in his tight grip. Achan, however, used the chaos to his advantage as he spotted a first-grade crystal core and quickly snatched it with his prehensile tail before anyone could possibly notice. The boss, badly shaken and nearly killed in the massive explosion, rushed into another room and slammed the door shut tightly behind him in a desperate bid to protect himself. Inside the room, several more goons were lying in wait. The boss declared that it was time to move and ordered them to prepare the car. As they were getting out of there, the goons immediately began to comply. At that very moment, our boy noticed another tattoo, this one etched into the side of the man's neck, revealing his true name. Now, everything became crystal clear to Achan. This person was none other than the true boss of the organization, Lai. He was the one who had turned Achan's life into a living hell in his previous life. Back then, however, Lai had always worn a concealing mask, which is why Achan never got to see his true face. Who would have ever thought he'd get the chance to finally witness it now, as a helpless baby, no less. Achan's baby glare was so intense that Lai actually felt it and even scolded him in sheer annoyance. The next moment, a strange, red mist began to fill the air around them. This was called a crimson dust, a dangerous phenomenon in this catalyst-infested world, and extremely hazardous to any human being. Those who came into contact with it either died or mutated into grotesque monsters. That explained why, just moments later, several of Lai's lackeys began to transform into monstrous, grotesque beasts and charged directly toward them. But Lai, in his usual cruel and sadistic fashion, decided to use Achan as monster bait. Without a single second thought, he tossed the baby into the room with the creatures and fled the scene, leaving it behind. Achan, as usual, understood the devious plan well, but he was ready to unleash his true, hidden power, even with a witness currently present. He pulled the crystal core from his pocket and activated it. In the next moment, he transformed into a full-grown, battle-ready fighter, primed and ready for battle. The overwhelming monster charged directly at him, but his tentacles intercepted the attack without the slightest hesitation. Now fused with the powerful crystal core, his abilities reached a brand new height, so enhanced that the monsters around him barely registered as physical beings anymore. Another creature attempted a laser strike from its eye, but without even flinching, Achan advanced straight through the deadly beam and pierced directly into the creature's body. He was almost amused by how easily he could control his new body. His tentacles now moved with a deadly, graceful elegance, slicing through the hordes of monsters, like vegetables on a simple chopping board. Meanwhile, Lai watched the scene unfold with growing, abject horror, confused and badly shaken. He failed to grasp Achan's true identity, having missed the stunning transformation from a helpless infant to a powerful warrior. One look at his pale, terrified face told Achan everything he needed to know. Lai didn't recognize him yet, and that made it all the more satisfying. Achan moved forward, his eyes dark with a singular purpose. There was no hesitation now. The moment for his long-awaited revenge had finally come. Even terrified, Lai immediately prepared to defend himself. He pulled out his gun and fired directly at Achan. Fortunately, Achan was now faster than the bullet itself, though the body he had transformed into wasn't his original one. Compared to his infant form, the speed and agility it offered were on a whole another level. Entirely, as Achan closed the gap to just an inch away, Lai assumed he must be a monster. But our boy didn't give him the chance to speak. In one swift, fluid motion, he hurled Lai across the room and slammed him hard into a corner. Now, coughing up copious amounts of blood, Lai mumbled something about a strange story he had once heard from someone, but now he saw was absolutely true. Achan briefly wondered who that person could have been, but he didn't have any time to dwell on it. Lai suddenly pulled out a syringe and injected himself with a strange, unknown drug. Within moments, his body began to shift, grotesquely morphing into a monstrous new form. Watching the horrific transformation, Achan immediately realized the terrible truth that long before the Great Catalyst, the organization had already been experimenting with this very drug, a formula designed to turn humans into monsters without stripping away their sanity. As the monster grew, Achan was visibly terrified. It lunged at him immediately, and though he barely managed to block the attack, he quickly retaliated with his powerful tentacles. But from that single powerful clash, he realized his opponent was no ordinary threat. The monster continued its relentless, furious assault, striking at him with sharp, silver tentacles, which Achan narrowly dodged. Just by observing its deadly movements, Achan understood this creature was meant to trap him from the very start. A chill ran down his spine as he recognized that this was the very same monster that had killed him in his past life. But this time, he was not the same person. He was not that helpless version of himself anymore, and he had no intention of dying to the same beast. Again, with renewed, fiery determination, he evaded each and every attack with sharp focus and a defiant, raw energy. Then suddenly, a powerful explosion erupted against the monster. As the thick dust settled, Achan saw the old military man reloading his guns with bullets, which he had stolen from the East Lotus Society. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. The old man was using the bad guy's own weapons for a good and noble cause. Meanwhile, Achan tried to process the sudden shift in the battle. The old man was targeting the giant-eyed monster, which was apparently Lai, still disguised in his monstrous, grotesque form. Watching the tides of battle turn, Achan couldn't help but grin widely. The game was changing, and this time it was in his favor. Lai remembered the time he joined the organization when one of its representatives lured him in by warning about an impending catastrophe in the world. She made it sound like joining the organization was the only possible way for him to survive. Then she handed him a drug as a gift for joining, while adding that it could help him uncover his true inner nature. At the time, as he looked at the strange medicine, he wasn't convinced by her words. He thought he already knew his true nature well enough. But once he took the injection and awakened his monstrous side, he became convinced that she was telling the truth, because he was born into a monster that thrives on exploiting other people's weaknesses. For example, when he was just a kid, he told a heavy-set lady that her husband was cheating on her. When she got angry, he added as proof that he had hurt her husband, calling her an ugly sleeping piggy a little while ago. The woman, who might have already been insecure about her figure, immediately believed him and became absolutely furious with her husband. After getting hit, the husband decided to divorce her. When he left, she was devastated by her own perceived ugliness, and like a guardian angel, Lai lured her into his nefarious trap by promising to introduce her to people who would definitely not bully her. This is how he exploited people's hearts, by gaining their trust and then draining them later. His scamming nature had turned him into a con artist, a true monster in human skin. That's why he was now born as a level 4 monster. Trickster Lai. Up until now, the monster our boy had witnessed was just a series of hallucinations. He saw the monster that had killed him in his past life and was scared to death by Lai's powerful trickery. Meanwhile, Lai decided not to waste his precious energy and waited for the right moment to strike back and win. In the end, suddenly, he was struck by a bullet and was startled to see the old man, ready to fight him again. He was frustrated by the old man's long life and immediately attacked him. But the old man stayed hidden, launching attacks without revealing his position. Lai attacked once again, but his strike was met with a deadly series of explosions. The clash created a large amount of smoke and dust, making it hard for him to see anything clearly. Taking advantage of the chaotic situation, Achan moved into his blind spot from behind. When Achan attacked, Lai cursed out loud, furious that he had snapped out of the hallucination so quickly. Achan stepped forward and declared that Lai was nothing more than a level 4 con man who could never be anything special. With that, he attacked Lai with his powerful tentacles, making Lai curse those very tentacles. In the next moment, Lai tried to create an illusion around Achan, but this time it didn't work. He was frustrated by the utter failure of his skill. Achan remembered the time he had tasted death in his past life because of the hallucination. While silently thanking Lai, he unleashed his full power. Lai was scared as Achan, with lightning speed, hurled himself directly toward him. Lai was bleeding profusely after being attacked by Achan. Achan then asked him calmly if he was finally done. But inside, he knew this was only just the beginning. In 2 hours, another wave of crimson dust would hit. It would be nothing like what humanity had faced before. This would be a deformed tide that would break hell wide open. As he prepared to finish Lai, I tried to stop him. Achan responded that he wasn't interested in his last words and was determined to finally end him. Meanwhile, the old man was also watching the scene unfold. Achan understood that Lai was a tough opponent who still wanted to fight, despite all of his grievous injuries. So it was better to finish him off by going straight for his neck. Just as he was about to strike, he was hit by an illusion. His mother appeared, pleading with him, asking if he was going to kill her too. He hesitated for a brief moment, and that single moment cost him dearly as he was hit by a series of explosions. Taking advantage of the opening, Lai attacked again, and Achan barely managed to dodge. As Achan got back on his feet, Lai declared that no matter what, Achan wouldn't be able to kill him. He could now clearly read Achan's thoughts and predict his every move. Lai knew that Achan had only one attack left in him. At that, our dude considered leaving Lai to the old man. At the same time, as if reading his thoughts, Lai had dodged a bullet fired by the old man and mocked him, asking if he planned to just stand there like always. Achan cursed under his breath, realizing too late that normal weapons didn't work against a level 4 monster. Lai, growing overconfident, believed he could see through the old man's tactics. With a menacing laugh and a declaration that he was a divine being, Lai headed toward the place where the old man was hiding. But as soon as he reached the spot, a grenade planted by the old man exploded. The moment Lai stepped in, seeing Lai injured, Achan complimented the old man's sharp instincts. Then he wondered where the old man had gone. As if in response, the old man appeared behind Lai and was about to attack. But Lai dodged at the last possible moment. Lai prepared to counterattack, but Achan called out his name to distract him. The sudden interruption startled Lai. Grinning, Lai asked Achan if he wanted to know about his future. While he was momentarily distracted, the old man shot him. Suddenly, a vision penetrated Lai's mind as he saw himself dealing with weaklings who were beneath him. Achan was showing Lai a future where he was always the loser, always useless in the end. Achan told him that this was his destiny. Furious, Lai grabbed his head and denied the claim. Another vision flashed that he was bowing before others in a pathetic, groveling stance. He refused to accept this grim future. Enraged, he lashed out wildly, but in the end, ended up injuring himself. The next moment, they all stared in utter disbelief as Lai had cut off his own head. Watching the scene unfold, Achan grinned. He had finally fooled the greatest con man of them all. As Lai's head flew from his body, he once again glimpsed Achan's memories. His eyes widened in fear as he saw the monster standing before him. The next moment, his severed head hit the ground, and he screamed for Achan to get out of his mind. He yelled at Achan, declaring that this is what the warning about the baby truly meant. The old man glanced at Achan, his attention peaked. Lai continued, his voice strained, that Achan was the egg of calamity, startling both Achan and the old man. Lai warned that by starting this revolution, Achan had forfeited any chance at a normal, peaceful life. From now on, the organization would hunt him down relentlessly. Before he could reveal anything more, another gunshot rang out, and Lai was silenced by a single bullet. Achan and the old man turned quickly toward the source. A new figure stepped out from his jeep, calmly explaining that if one doesn't kill their enemy in time, they will become their own worst enemy. The moment Achan realized the man was from the military, he went on high alert. The newcomer called the old man teacher, crediting him for the very lesson he had just spoken. His name was Captain Lion, but he was more famously known as the Snow Wolf. Before the student and teacher could exchange greetings, another monster came up from behind Lion. Without even flinching or moving, he killed the monster. Our guy, who was watching from behind the box, was completely astonished to see it. At that moment, the old man asked Lion to be there on purpose because he intended to go home and look after his grandchild. While taking out his phone, Lion pleaded with his teacher to return to headquarters, as they were in a state of emergency. He then showed him a picture of his granddaughter, who was safe and sound. He reminded him that the military needed their commander. While listening to this, Achan immediately realized that this old man was none other than the top commander of the entire military. Then Lion asked the old man whether he wanted to confirm his granddaughter's safety. The old man agreed to go with him. Meanwhile, Achan was scared and unsure of what to do. When he moved, it drew their attention. Before a moment could pass, Lion was already on him, his gun pointed. Fortunately, Achan had already transformed into his baby form. Lion suspiciously asked whether he was the monster he saw a little while ago. Achan, meanwhile, was scared to death, wondering if Lion was going to shoot him. But the old man stepped in, informing his student that he was the one who had placed Achan there, while scooping him into his arms. He whispered to Achan to keep pretending. With that, Achan started crying like a baby, which he literally was. Lion commented on how well he got along with the baby. Suddenly, our boy sensed a strange, dark aura coming from Lion, and looked at him closely. In that moment, he wondered whether he had seen him before in the organization. Later, Achan was placed in the nursery with the other babies. When the nurse placed him in the crib, Lion told her to go back, and she complied without a single question. While pretending to sleep, Achan listened to all of this and wondered about the whereabouts of the old man. He also wondered about the place he was in. Suddenly, a baby started to cry, drawing Lion's attention. At first, he smoothly commented on the baby's energy and asked him to be quiet, but then his tone shifted as he used his skill to make the baby fall asleep. Meanwhile, our boy was witnessing all of this, his eyes wide in pure horror. He remembered that Lion was quite an important figure in the organization, with the ominous code named Tank. Not only that, he possessed a very rare and formidable ability in which he could exploit and explode the blood in anyone's body at will. He knew that Lion had used his skill on the baby, which caused severe oxygen deprivation, making the baby unconscious rather than simply fall asleep. Naturally, he was someone Achan knew he must be cautious of, especially after his earlier attempt to kill him. Now, Lion was moving toward her baby. Meanwhile, Achan was thinking about his own abilities, which he had awakened too early. Considering the organization had only just started, he wondered whether he was already one of the compatible few to awaken his powers before the end times. At that moment, Lion decided to inspect Achan and told him to be quiet. Achan held his breath the entire time. As soon as Lion moved away, Achan let out a sigh of relief. Before leaving, Lion commented on how fun it was. As he left, Achan glanced around to make sure he was really gone. Then he immediately jumped to his feet. He recalled Lai, a master con artist, someone who could manipulate minds. Achan had abilities like god-level absorption, which created a powerful barrier in his mind to protect his thoughts from Lai. Now, to protect himself against Lion, he tuned his own blood flow, slowing it down and allowing the fake blood to be automatically absorbed. After observing it, he looked around at the other kids and wondered whether they were also the calamity eggs. It wasn't like he was unfamiliar with the term. He had heard it in his past life, but due to his lower status back then, he never had access to that kind of secret information. Still, he believed Lion must know something about it. He then analyzed the situation with the military, which had been eliminated in his past life by the organization. His thoughts drifted to the old man, who clearly didn't trust Lion, since he had wanted to personally check on his grandchild. He also wondered about the inspection Lion had performed on him. There were too many thoughts swirling in his mind. Then he remembered his mother and his dog, but he quickly jerked those thoughts away. He wasn't in a situation where he could think about others. Right now, all he needed to focus on was his escape plan. He tried to open the door with his ability, but he couldn't use it. He remembered the crystal core he had obtained earlier, which he used to fuse the ability called Dark Shadow. But during the fusion process, he couldn't use many of his other abilities. Currently, he could only use Dark Shadow and God Barrier. The latter helped him resist dangerous mental attacks, but Dark Shadow was too powerful and risky to use in his current delicate situation. So he decided to wait and understand the intentions of those around him before using his powers and risking total exposure. So far, pretending to be just a baby had worked out well for him. Suddenly, he noticed something emerging from another nearby crib. He looked down at another baby whose legs were turning into solid tree branches. So this baby must be another compatible one, just like him. Then he noticed several other babies with different kinds of abilities he remembered in his past life. These babies were always locked away. Now he understood that they were all placed, somewhere similar to where he was now. Suddenly, a tree vine scooped him up. When he tried to break free, he couldn't. He wondered for a moment whether he should use his abilities now or not. But his thoughts were interrupted by another boy who helped him to break free. It turned out to be a little boy who advised him to just pretend to sleep. So now, he should just behave. Achan was taken aback to see that the boy was just 5 years old and had already fully mastered his abilities. Suddenly, he cursed under his breath as he heard a sound behind him. The boy immediately escaped, disappearing from sight. Achan turned to see nurses entering the room for inspection, and he quickly pretended to be asleep on the floor. The head nurse instructed everyone to gather every single baby. One of them noticed him lying there and scooped him up. As well, as all this unfolded, Achan wondered what was really going on here, and what they planned to do with him. After a while, the nurses placed all the babies on the cold floor. He slightly opened his eyes and saw nothing but pure darkness surrounding them. A chilling thought crossed his mind. Are they going to be made to fight to the death? It wouldn't be surprising, as this was a common trend in the organization. During his past life, he also sensed the ominous presence of someone from the organization nearby. Slowly, he began to crawl, as other babies also started getting up. When he looked up, he spotted Lion on the upper floor. Before he could process anything else, he saw a monster moving toward a baby. At first, he guessed that these babies were going to be prey for the monster, as he remembered there were no babies in his past life. Then he noticed that the monster was restrained by heavy chains, but that didn't mean they were safe now. He guessed the restraints were only temporary, and the monster was likely to be unleashed upon them later. Everyone around him was also afraid to see it. The boy from before stepped ahead, scooped the crying baby from the monster's vicinity, and placed him far away. Looking around at the babies and at Lion, he now concluded that they had all been gathered here to fight the monster in order to forcefully awaken their hidden abilities. The purpose of gathering these babies here must be the organization's infamous plan, known as the hunting dog plan. After Lai, the plan was entrusted to Lion. At that moment, Lion revealed he was just pretending in front of his teacher. Then he politely asked everyone not to disappoint him and pressed the button to start their deadly test. With that, the restraints on the monster broke down, and it rushed directly toward our boy, but he barely managed to dodge it. In the process, his ear got badly injured. He looked at the monster, which might be second grade. He was confident that he could take it down, but he wasn't so sure about the others. He looked around at the others, who were scared to death. One of the toddlers started to cry, drawing the monster's undivided attention. Now it was moving toward that very baby, but the girl beside the toddler got frightened. And with that, her tree branch ability activated. Several powerful vines wrapped around the monster. Achan gave the girl a thumbs up and hoped she could hold on. At that moment, Lion also noticed her unique ability, which was identified as a vine type. He complimented it, saying that it was a good one, especially considering it was only at the first grade level. His attention then shifted to our boy, who hadn't shown any of his abilities yet. Still, he was convinced Achan must be an ability user. In his mind, he believed Achan would definitely activate his powers once pushed into extreme, life-threatening conditions. With that, the monster broke free from the tangled vines and prepared to unleash its full, terrifying power. Achan was startled to see the gravity of the situation.